We all commit sins. Sin is the result of our actions toward different planes of life, which intersect at a point called man. We are taught that any sin in our account is earned solely by ourselves. The question is, can someone transfer their sin to our account? Are we responsible for the evil we commit until the end? It is impossible to directly answer that, but you can look at it closer enough to see that evil and good can sometimes be poured into the same vessel, and by mixing them thoroughly, we will not cause the transformed substance to stratify. I allowed myself this introduction for a reason. I once heard a seemingly credible story about a monster from London, or it seemed like it. Why? Because only 2 months after one of the witnesses told me this story, I managed to hear another version of the same event from a completely different perspective. It was sadder, more horrible, repulsive than the first one, but it also evoked compassion, understanding, and even hatred. It injected me with a large dose of hatred for people and the world, allowing me to feel and redefine my aversion to these cattle. Mark Anderson, or Anderheim, my bad memory for names, told me a story about a certain monster. The description that he gave me reminded me of a 10th generation Frankenstein, and this made me approach the subject with a good deal of skepticism. I should also add that Mark got in touch with me through my website, where I post various articles about unusual phenomena like conspiracy theories, ghost stories, and anything that might give us the creeps. I run the portal with Anna and Max, and we often exchange observations with readers on our forum. That is how we, came across a guy with the last name A. He mentioned that the creature had its right eye poking out, wandering in every possible direction, while his other eye was pressed firmly into its eye socket and always pointed straight at its victim. The spine twisted in 2 directions, but the dominant one was the left side curvature, and it gave the impression that the scruffy beast was permanently carrying an invisible weight attached to its shoulder. The thick, slimy, and bloated belly seemed to have been thoroughly stuffed, eliminating the unpleasant sight of dangling folds of fat. The question was, what was it stuffed with? The witness, A, unequivocally claimed that there must have been a living being inside, no longer living, based on the red and carelessly wiped streaks that had almost managed to clot. Yes, it had to be a living being. This description seemed irrational. When I read the writing, I froze for a moment until I quickly came down to earth. Not even the worst genetic mutations could not cause such deformities, and London is a big city in which nothing of this kind could function. I thought that the guy was talking rubbish, so I had to give him an assertive reply because that is the professional thing to do. Now, I will skip the long exchange of opinions and deliberations with my co-editors to get to the point, as something pushed us to spend a few hours discussing the topic. We considered that the article will still appear, even if nothing comes of it. We did not lose much for doing a little research. With that in mind, we went through the archived news stories from the past 2 years about disappearances and murders. Most of the many stories there seemed to have no connection to each other, or that is that we thought. Now, I think that we may have been wrong. We decided to focus on the extremely unusual cases of particularly inhumane murders. I know that every murder is inhumane, and I am sorry for using such a term, but unfortunately, evil is so widespread that even murder, in a sense, is already human. I think about crimes bordering on demonic bestiality, in which it was not enough a black bag for the corpse. The kind of crime where the fire department was called to the scene to pressure wash the blood from the cube and the walls of the buildings, separated from each other only by a narrow street a few meters wide. Around central London, there were several more cases of this nature. I also remembered an article about a massacred woman who had been dismembered, but that is not the important part. My attention was drawn to why would someone do it, because there had to be a reason. Each limb had been separated from the body out of mere convenience of consumption. The target seemed to be bone marrow, although the perpetrator did not disdain to separate meat from the bone, so it made it difficult to specifically read their intentions. The only certainty was homicide. There were a few more of these cases to which the police would float the journalists and reporters with some ridiculous explanation. That is how it is with them. Every excuse has its legal basis, and there is nothing you can do about it. But the important part is that we decided to investigate this subject more closely, so we read the message from Mark Anderheim once again, which read as follows. I should add that the language will be coarse at times. I and my friend Paul like to go out at night with a beer in hand. Last night, we also went on a little trip. We had run out of smokes the day before, so we hoped to find a vendor somewhere in the alley. So we walk around, once in one place, once in another, but nothing. There is no one. So we went on. We just ran out of beer and wanted, as is our custom, to throw the cans culturally to the nearest waste disposal site. So we walked to the other end of the unlit parking lot. As we approached the buckets and containers, we heard some sounds, something like a wild animal, picking through the trash, looking for leftover stinky food. We figured there was probably a rodent or two tearing through the bags. Paul shined the flashlight from his phone, and then we all screamed, "Oh fuck," at the same time. I will omit the description of the creature with which the writer had contact, because it is already familiar to us. Mark goes on to write, even if we had been badly gobsmacked, neither of us would have given credence to what stood staring straight at us. Panic caused us to stand transfixed for a moment, but the thing also seemed to have been greatly startled by our sight. Paul was the quickest of the three of us to react. He spotted a piece of fairly thick rod nearby, thick enough to be able to deliver a few blows with it without risking that it would bend. Paul rushed over and impetuously punched the creature in the deformed face. A hissing sound, resembling a cross between the howl of a dog, the squeal of a pig, and the roar of a horse, rang out. Paul struck again, expending a considerable amount of energy. Blood poured from what looked like a forehead to the beast. The whimpering grew louder, but I could no longer hear the panic in it. Only aggression and something that will seem damn strange. It seemed to me that, in the sounds that reached my ears, I could also see sadness or maybe disappointment. I don't know. I had so many thoughts per second that I don't think I could rationally assess the situation. Anyway, the monster pushed Paul away, leaving claw marks on his white shirt, contrasting with red. Paul fell and lost the rod, which probably rolled under one of the containers. I ran as fast as I could to help him up, but I was slower than the thing. The monster rushed at him to sink its clawed hands into his guts. I couldn't stand it. I knew there was nothing I could do, so I ran straight to the nearest police station, but the officer on duty didn't believe me, of course. He stated that I was under the influence of drugs and alcohol. They would lock me in the cell so that I could, as he said, regain my senses. So that's how I spent the night in the cell, shaken and broken, and my friend joined the menu of the creature. That thing just had to fuck him up. Do you understand? This thing is roaming the streets of our city and posing a huge threat while the police won't help, and the massacre that took place was covered up because they had no leads. First of all, they didn't have a body, and my testimony was destroyed, as if it wasn't supposed to see the light of day, as if nothing happened, as if it was all planned, and I am obliged to see a psychiatrist every month. The guy tries to convince me that what I saw was just a figment of my imagination and prescribes me some medications supposedly for memory and concentration. The psychiatrist who worked here 2 years ago was more humane and a dedicated professional. However, this is not relevant. That is all, since Mark never wrote to our editor again. Curiosity had us checking out all the clues, and we repeatedly walked the streets of London, checking the parking lots, the den, and other disgusting places. We surveyed and interviewed various people, but found nothing. No one heard or saw anything. Today, after 2 months, was the day we closed the case. Anna and Max left the editorial office, and I stayed for a while, trying to sort through the chaos of papers on my desk. Half an hour after my co-workers left, late in the evening, someone knocked on the door. I wanted to pretend I was not there, because I did not feel like getting up, but I did not want to make anyone an idiot, since you can see the light, though the crack under the door. I opened it and found no one, but certainly not nothing. On the doormat, there was a purple notebook with a frayed cover. I looked carefully left and right to see if anyone was watching me from a corner of the corridor before picking up the gift and returning to my office. I put down all the documentation in the mess it was in and got down to reading, and that was the first time that I read something of this sort. It was fucking messed up, for it looked like what I was reading was the result of someone could not write conveying their thoughts to another person in a very sloppy way, and the person writing down those thoughts had the task to organize and guide them, while also adding something from themselves, but with credibility. How can I be sure that this is what happened? The last sentence emphasized the truth that I perceived. The content read as follows: I died. Death was angry, but it smiled at me with a mocking smile, a harbinger of torture and infirmity, a harbinger of other people's sins that I had been fed for years. If no one is born a monster, then why do monsters exist? Where do they come from, and who, indeed, is the monster? Where does evil lie? It is an honest evil from which everyone runs away, but sooner or later they fall into its trap anyway. I used to look for it and fight it as a policeman, because I'm not one anymore, am I? I was good. I saved my comrades many times in many occasions. Yes. I used to look for evil, but now I see it everywhere, under every stone, under every broken piece of wood, in the air. I mostly see it in beauty. The more majestic it is, the more double-edged and dangerous it is. The beautiful shell always hides an impaired soul, and the one who is covered with a beautiful coat will not understand the heaviness of being mud and dirt. I ask myself, was I saved to live? Can this be called salvation? Is it salvation to forget? I don't know the answers to the questions I ask to my psychiatrist, who has agreed to leave his job for me. But is he really here for me? I remember, as if through a fog, the surgical suite and some strange organs and test tubes filled with colored substances. That is what I remember of the last minutes of my first life. Now, I look into a sheet of water standing in a clogged sewer somewhere outside of London. I look and see the creature that once proudly called itself human. I see my claws, dirty from the fresh blood of the boy who attacked me when I tried to get food in a dumpster. I never wanted to kill, to attack, or even scare anyone. If my eyes could produce tears, hectoliters of them would flow. People attack me because they are afraid of me, and I, in turn, staring at my reflection, am afraid of myself. And the worst thing in all this is that it makes me the only being in the world who, out of fear, even of myself, cannot kill myself.